Welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show. I'm your host, Ryan Cartlidge, and I'm passionate about helping you master your animal training skills using the most positive and least intrusive approaches. Here at ATA, we understand that navigating the vast challenges you encounter in training requires a comprehensive base of knowledge and experience. It's common to face obstacles and rough patches on your journey that can leave you feeling overwhelmed and stressed. Therefore, since 2015, we've been on a mission to empower animal training geeks worldwide. We've aided thousands in developing their skills, expanding their knowledge, boosting their confidence, and maximizing their positive impact on all the animal and human learners they work with. We are excited to do the same for you. Simply visit www.atamember.com, join our vibrant community, and geek out with us. And of course, in the meantime, enjoy this free podcast episode as we explore new ways to help you supercharge your training skills, grow your knowledge, and build your confidence, so that you can craft a life that positively impacts every learner you encounter. But we will start today's episode where I'll be talking to one Sara Brueske. Sara is a Karen Pryor Academy certified training partner who has turned a childhood passion into a dynamic, multifaceted career. Her professional path took a unique turn when she was hired by Purina as a full-time dog trainer and performer. And for 6 years, Sara and her diverse team of dogs performed daily dog sport shows at Purina Farms, promoting responsible pet ownership to thousands across the country. Today, Sara channels that high-level performance experience into her roles as a business owner and an international educator. She owns Happy Dog Lodge, a boarding and training facility in Minnesota, and teaches handlers worldwide through online courses and seminars. While an accomplished competitor with international champions in disc dog, Sara's core mission is to build true partnerships through clear communication and positive reinforcement, empowering both the dog and the handler to excel as a team. So without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome Sara to the show today, who is patiently waiting by. Sara, thank you so much for taking the time to come and hang out with us at Animal Training Academy.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
It's my absolute pleasure. And Sara, I think I mentioned to you when we caught up that I'm an absolute bird nerd. I spent all of my zoo career really working with birds. And I think you offer me a first in the 260 plus episodes that we've done, and that you had to just preface us starting today with some reassurance that your corvid is contained.
Yes, she is contained. The African pied crow, she is contained, and we don't want her flying around while I'm recording this. It will not go well.
Yeah. Now, a lot of our listeners are in the US, and I appreciate that in different states in the US, there's different laws around pet ownership and what species you can house. In New Zealand here, we definitely would have the government knocking on our door if we had an exotic crow species, I think, living in our house. But share a little bit with the listeners about who you're sharing your office with today and kind of how they came to be in your life. And yeah, just tell us about what's their name?
Yeah, her name is Penguin because she's black and white like a penguin. Yes, obviously. It's very great for my poor little 3-year-old daughter who's learning animal names when I tell her that this is Penguin. She gets that a little bit confused now, but that's okay. She's a 8-year-old African pied crow that I purchased from a breeder. And yeah, so as long as you don't have a native species here in Minnesota, you're good to go. So that's how people can own exotic parrots like African greys and macaws and the like. So she's no different than that. She's just obviously a different species with higher requirements and different requirements as far as her care goes. But she's a lot of fun. I have always loved birds. I had parakeets growing up, and I've had, some other birds in my life. And the crow is pretty unique because she's very similar to a dog in terms of her eating style, what she wants to eat, how she acquires that food. And so she's super fun to train because she's, kind of more of a hunter versus just a gatherer like parrots and the like. And so she loves to work for food. She's super smart. I love training her. I've taught her to play Frisbee. I've been teaching her colors. She's a lot of fun. We go on adventures together. She'll go hiking with me and my dogs on a leash, of course. But yeah, she's a blast.
And did she join your family with the benefit of allowing you to broaden your practical application of your skills? Was that like a motivator for you?
Yeah, anytime I have an animal that's different that I get to train, it obviously will sharpen my skills in different ways. And the big thing with the birds, as you are well aware, you can't force them to do anything, right? With dogs, we have that gifted genetic ability and desire to be partners with us. And birds, you don't necessarily get that same opportunity and same leverage. And so, yeah, definitely a learning curve, and definitely have to break things down a little bit more in different ways. And yeah, just not take that relationship part of it for granted. She's super smart, and she's like playing chess. I always explain that she's like a border collie, a flying border collie. She's always 2 steps ahead of me in her thinking. And flying gets to add a whole nother factor into that, because she could just fly away any moment and be like, no, I don't want to participate anymore. And so setting up the sessions so that she's successful, she wants to work with me, and then making sure I'm splitting things and making sure that I'm always thinking about how my actions are going to impact our trust and our relationship, and making sure that that is at the forefront of my brain constantly.
Yeah, I love corvids, and working with corvids. They're some of my favorite bird species to work with, and just always marvel at how just birds in general, but I think corvids are, all birds are unique, but corvids are unique in the research that's been done with this group of birds, and the research that has led to the label intelligent being used. Part of that, from my understanding, and I'm not across all of the research, but their use of tools, picking up sticks, for example, and then manipulating those sticks in order to access reinforcers and food. And I always find it so interesting to think about how small their brains are, and where the term like bird brain comes from. But that's a terrible label, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not an accurate label at all. Birds are wicked smart, and I don't understand that either. Like, if we just go off of physical appearance of how tiny their brain is, fine. But no, she's so smart. And while I haven't seen her use tools or given her that opportunity, she is fed always out of food puzzles, and it does not take her long to figure out those food puzzles. Enrichment for her is one of my main priorities in owning a bird. They need that constant enrichment and that relationship, and that being in your space and everything. And so that definitely is a factor that plays into that. But yeah, she's smart. She picks things up super fast as far as learning goes, and outsmarting me, but yeah, and definitely not bird-brained.
Well, they say that the smartest bird in the world comes from New Zealand. Sarah, did you know that?
Which one is that?
The Kia, the mountain parrot.
Oh, yeah. The ground dwelling, they don't fly, right?
No, there's a kakapo. That's the one who everyone knows about, who jumped on Stephen Fry, the comedian's head, and
I've seen that clip, yes.
Sirocco. Kias are alpine parrots, but additionally, there's been studies and forays into their use of tools. But anyway, just wanted to take a moment to share that intelligent people and earthlings come from New Zealand.
Never a doubt in my mind.
Let's move on, Sarah. I'm curious. I love just hearing about and sharing with our audience about people's learning odysseys, as we like to call them here on Animal Training Academy, and just find so much insight and inspiration from how people got from where they started to where they are today. So can you take us back and share with our listeners where you first learned about positive reinforcement and got into working with behavior? And I'm going to assume the story starts with dogs.
It does, yeah. So I've always been involved in dogs. When I was 11 years old, I saved up my allowance to get my first border collie out of the newspaper. Super educated as far as that sourcing goes. But I started clicker training right away with him, teaching him a whole bunch of different tricks, to throw away my empty soda cans, to close the front door because I was lazy. He was very smart and got me really hooked in dog training. I got the chance to compete with him in agility. My parents built me like agility courses out in the backyard using construction tunnels and all of that stuff, whatever we could use. And that was super fun. But, as I grew up, I kind of got out of dog training and decided I didn't want to pursue that as a career. Wasn't sure what I was going to do. Eventually found my way back. And I started getting into agility again, but this time with Great Danes. So I had 2 Great Danes that I trained in agility, and they were great. One of them had some pretty severe human reactivity issues. And, back then I weighed a whopping, 120 pounds. This dog definitely outsized me, and it was dangerous to handle him. And I had gotten to his breeder and asked for help. And she said, well, he just needs to have a come to Jesus moment. And I'm like, I don't know what that means, 1. And 2, I don't know how physically I would be capable of doing anything to this dog that would make him think twice about his consequence or about his actions. Just physically, I just wasn't able to do that. And then we ran into an issue where our 2 Great Danes started having some same-sex aggression issues in the household. So we had some inter-household issues. And at that point, I started seeking out other ways to train because obviously I wasn't going to physically be able to manhandle or correct these dogs. And it was getting to be a little bit of a dangerous situation. And so while I had always known about clicker training, a lot of my behavior training came from that old school thought, that old school mentality of just make it happen and it'll happen for you. And that just wasn't something that was going to be happening with these 2 dogs. And so I started seeking out a little bit more. I started looking at counter conditioning, Leslie McDivitt's Control Unleashed, those pattern games. All of that stuff kind of came to a head and showed me there's a whole nother world when it comes to dog training and a different way to approach this that was going to be a lot more feasible with these 2 giant dogs. We did end up rehoming the one Dane. It was just too much of an issue with inter-household aggression, but I did keep the one that had the reactivity issues because I didn't feel that he was safe to place in another home. And we continued to make progress. He was never at the point where I was able to trial him in agility or anything like that. And his story does end in some behavioral euthanasia at that, at a younger age. And so it wasn't a success story in that, but it was a success story in the fact that I learned a lot about training. And it was all the stuff that I wish I had known when I first got him, right? And so how do I teach that relationship? How do I form, that engagement and knowing about the counter conditioning and knowing about what to do when my dog does show uncomfortable feelings and how to handle that versus just a come to Jesus moment as it was recommended to me. And so I wanted to pursue more dog training, but at that point and for a long while after that, I was really, really sport focused. So I had wanted to become an agility instructor. I had been doing it since I was 11 with some breaks here and there and really wanted to get into that. And my mentor at the time had recommended that I get a dog that was going to be a little bit more capable in the sport, seeing as though my only agility dog was a human reactive Great Dane. And so I rescued Zuma, my border collie mix, from a local rescue here. And she was just a superstar. She was able to get some titles in agility, but she really got me hooked on the sport of disc. And that's kind of where everything just snowballed from there. I knew I wanted another dog to do Frisbee with, agility with. And so I imported an Australian Collie named Zinga, and I learned with her. And then pretty soon I was hired by Purina to do shows with them. And that's kind of where I started getting a little bit more recognized, because my full-time job, 40 hours a week, was literally training my own dogs to do cool stuff. And when you have that many different dogs that you get to experience and fostering and, playing with just a huge variety of dogs on that level, you get pretty creative when it comes to training behaviors and learning to shape those behaviors, and how do you keep those behaviors reliable enough for performances. And so that's kind of where it's all gone from there. Clear communication, teaching that, and just a lot of hands-on experience from having that job led me to where I am.
It sounds like a lot of fun, 40 hours a week training jobs, but I assume additionally, like, it came with a lot of pressure and stress, or was it all just fun?
We had a really good team and really good management that understood that dogs are dogs, right? And we're people. And so we were never judged on a bad show day, or if our dogs, didn't quite perform as they normally would, not a big deal. I always tell a story of, we had the CEO stop by. So it was a VIP show, right? And so we always get super hyped about VIP shows. A lot of people from headquarters would come down and watch the show. And so I had this special lineup. I was really excited. I had my A team, as I would call it, on. And I finished my freestyle routine, head up to the dock to end with some big dock diving. And I turn around after getting the crowd pumped, and there's my dog pooping on the dock. And the CEO was in the audience. And so we just laugh about that. Dogs are dogs. You do the best you can. It was a 6 p.m. show. It was out of our routine. It is what it is. So yeah, there was pressure. The pressure came more from the form of me learning how to manage my expectations and my confidence outside of the job. So a lot of people wanted that job, and it was really an honor to be chosen for it. And I will never take that for granted. But with that, there's a lot of people that believed they should have been hired for it. Or at least in my mind, I was putting it on that I thought they should have been hired for it, right? Because my confidence was low. And so where it came from, that pressure, was in competitions outside of the job. I was good at my job. I know I was good at my job, but putting myself one-to-one with the other players that had also applied for that job was a real struggle for me. And so I ended up stopping competing in Frisbee for a long time. Recently got back into it a little bit more serious now. But yeah, that's where the pressure came from, was outside of the job itself. The job itself was great.
Do you reflect on that pressure much, and some of the things you said there about your confidence? Do you reflect on that much? Like, is that something that you've intentionally gone, here's what I've learned from that, I've looked for opportunities to reframe that or to think about that differently, and done some self-exploration on that side of things?
Constantly, honestly, constantly. There was a lot about that time period that was challenging. And so I did work with a therapist for a long time, a sports-specific therapist, because of the competition route. So her main job was working with athletes in the college divisions, those athletes that were trying to go for pro and having those same type of feelings. And so I sought her out and I worked with her for a good long while about how I was feeling about competitions, how I was feeling about my job. And so I did a lot of work in the time, but now that I'm several years removed, I'm still working through it. I was just talking yesterday with my old coworker about, because she's also transitioned out of that and transitioned to different phases of her life as well. And it's so funny because when I left that job, I was really worried about people knowing who I am anymore, and being able to come back and win competitions and maintaining that level of prevalence and importance. And now that we're 5 years from that point, I'm like, who cares? I've moved on to this other phase of my life, Happy Dog Lodge and having a kid. And at first it was really hard for me to let go of that, but now it's gotten to the point where I'm like, it's not that big of a deal. I can come back. I can move back into that in another phase of my life, or I can just live in this phase of my life, and that's just fine. And so, yeah, no, it's a constant amount of work. And the thing that made me talk with her about it specifically was somebody had shared a blog post of mine from 2019, I think. And I read it and I was like, oh, that's a good blog post. And like it had just, it surprised me that I wrote that. And it reminded me that, oh no, I was at that level and I still am at that level. But now that I moved on to this new phase of life and I work mainly with local people who don't know who I am, they don't put any importance behind my name. And I only occasionally do seminars, travel and do seminars and do more of that worldwide stuff. It was really eye-opening and go, no. How I felt was valid. I did have, important things to say. And now it's okay that I don't. And it was really kind of a cool feeling looking back and seeing that shared and seeing like, oh yeah, no. It was real.
I'm asking these questions for multiple reasons. One, because when I look at surveys that we send out to our audience, so there's multiple segments of our audience, there's current members of our academy, there's past members, and there's people that engage with our content but have never kind of dived deeper into their journey with us. But universally across that feedback is this problem that people have, that they are worried that they're going to mess things up if they try something or it's not going to be perfect. So that's one reason. I said there was two. The second reason is people are going to get on the show like where Ryan's thoughts are in any moment of time. So I've been listening to a podcast in the last few days specifically about confidence and about expectations. And so you said there about some provoking thoughts to share from what I've been listening to. But firstly, I just want to get curious and ask, when you decided to leave Purina Farms, and maybe you said this, and my apologies if I missed that because I was thinking about some of these things that I'm saying now. Was that because of that pressure you felt and the lack of confidence? Was that the reason, or was it a combination of things?
No, I left because it was time for us to start a family. And I wanted to start that family back up here in Minnesota, where our family is. She's the only grandchild of my husband's mom. And so we wanted to make sure we were sharing that life with her. The other thing is I always knew that Purina was not going to be a long-term career for me. The issue is when you work at a job like that and you're performing as often as my dogs were, you have to have a number of dogs to fill the shows and backup dogs in case of injuries and to spread that workload. And so what ends up happening is your dogs get to the point where they retire, but you have to have other dogs to replace those dogs. And so you end up with a large number of dogs that I was not comfortable with having. And so my leaving was actually timed pretty well with most of my dogs getting to retirement age. And so that was a very convenient time for me to leave. And then the added, variable was COVID. So I left fully. I was part-time just a little bit before that, but I left fully just in the middle kind of COVID. So yeah, that was the thing. So no, I think I had done enough work while I was at Purina to overcome the confidence things where I was very comfortable in the job itself. I was getting more comfortable with competition. I had shifted my focus from Frisbee and agility more to Mondio Ring and IGP. And that helped me separate the job from my kind of sport life and my training life. So, I got to do a lot of fun training stuff at work and sharpen those skills, but the hobby side of it kind of turned into the protection sports for me. And so I really got to focus on those, and those took all my extra time because they're protection sports and that's what they do. And so I didn't really have time left over for disc and agility. I just shifted my focus away from that, and that helped.
Yeah, cool. And keen to learn if there was any other things you did to overcome some of the expectations that you were placing on yourself and the confidence that you mentioned, over and above like kind of switching to different sports and some of the things you just mentioned then. For the reasons that I mentioned earlier, just I know that a lot of our audience kind of struggles with these issues.
I think a lot of trainers struggle with confidence issues. I always talk about peaks and valleys, and I have those valleys constantly. You grow in your knowledge, and then something will happen. And we talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect and all of that, but it's more than that, right? Something will happen that'll hurt your confidence. It'll sink down low. You'll build yourself back up, and you'll sink down low. Everybody has those. And the strength to try something new, like you mentioned, the courage to step outside of your comfort zone. This was specifically kind of what I was talking with my old coworker about, was knowing that there's plenty of time in your life to try different things and move through different phases. Who you are now is just one little facet of yourself, right? So that was Purina Sara, right? And now I'm on to Happy Dog Lodge Sara. And I'm really excited to see what comes after that one and just keep churning through this journey. And not everything has to be done right this moment, which is something I really need to work on. But yeah, there's always something new around the corner.
Do you in your mind find it helpful? And this is something that I find myself doing, like separating like identities. To be like, there was Purina Sara and now there's Happy Dog Lodge Sara. Like, do you find it helpful to like view those as separate Saras? Or like is that just a way to kind of communicate a different concept that you're trying to get across?
I think right now it's healthiest enough for me to separate them out. And I think that's why I default to that. However, I do know that there would be no Happy Dog Lodge Sara without Purina Sara. And there would have been no Purina Sara without On the Run Sara, right? And so, and bartender Sara before that, all of these things all of these little steps in my journey are what created the Sara I am today. Also, I need to stop referring to myself in third person. I really don't like that. But like all of those little pieces, I always marvel at how each little thing that I did, every little skill I taught myself or I learned from somebody else has really led me to be able to be the team leader I am today for Happy Dog Lodge and be able to step in at any point and problem solve on the fly without stress. And I don't think I could have done that 10 years ago. I don't think that my facility would be what it is today. And I would not be as content in the job today as I would have been 10 years, 10 years ago, I would not have been as content as I am today with it.
Yeah, I get that. So it's like, it is kind of different people because of 10 years ago, you didn't have the same learning experience that you have now. So you think differently and make different decisions. I was just interested because I was like exploring that with my own thinking, being like hearing myself be like differentiate myself, and I'm like, hang on, like that doesn't make any sense.
Sometimes I cringe looking back on old stuff I put out there, but other times it was like that blog post. I was like, oh no, this is actually really good. And it's nice right now where I'm at to be able to go back and look at that stuff. Even if there's some things where I'm like, why would I do that? That doesn't make any sense.
So how would you feel if you look back at that blog post and the information was in Happy Dog Lodge Sarah's opinion, not up to her expectations?
No, I would have just assumed that I was silly, and I've grown since then.
and when you were talking about managing your own expectations and did I hear right that you were kind of navigating your perception that other people wanted your job and comparing yourself in some ways, and maybe I misheard that part, so just want to clarify now, like comparing yourself to other people in the sports world?
Yeah, so the job itself was really geared towards Frisbee dog players. That's most of what the shows are Frisbee dog routines. Then we add in agility and dock diving and tricks and scent work and kind of whatever else we wanted in there. But that was the main, meat of the show. And so what happened was when the job was open, a bunch of us Frisbee dog players applied for it. And these were my friends. These were the people I compete against that were applying for this job. And so when I got it, I had already thought I was not at their level. So I was already playing below them. They were always beating me in competition. But there was other things that Purina was looking for to fill that role besides a Frisbee dog player. It was not the single factor, the variable that they were considering. Obviously, there was other skills that I had that those people weren't as prevalent in, and that's why I got chosen for the job. So the issue is that when I was at Purina doing my work, and then I would go to the competitions, and I would choke. I had a really hard time competing against those people, or even sending my entries in to even get on the field. And so I would end up scratching. I wouldn't compete because I wasn't comfortable enough showing that they were better at that part of the job than I was. And so now I have 2 young dogs in Frisbee that are definitely not. They're young, we're just new teams. And so we're going to have fumbles and bumbles. That would not have bothered me so much before, when I still had all my, A-team dogs that are now retired. I wouldn't have been able to compete with them. Like I would have been embarrassed walking on the field with them. But now I remember, and I know, and I've grown that, hey, it's a phase in our career together. It's a part of our journey. And next year it's going to be better. And the year after that, it's going to be even better. And so I just got to put that work in and show up on the field and do that part of the work as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing all that. And I want to throw some ideas at you again. And now this part is because these are things that I've been inspired from in the most recent while, but it ties really nicely into this conversation and ties really nicely into the problem that I believe a lot of our audience have, which is exactly what you just described. So a few things from some content I've been listening to. One, they shared this, and I'm going to say this with a grain of salt because I can't quote where it came from exactly. I'm just repeating something that I heard in a podcast episode. The podcast show is called Diary of a CEO. Can't remember even the host of it. But he said that when someone wins the lottery, those people's neighbors often go bankrupt.
Oh.
And it's because of this comparingness that we're doing, that we're the reinforcer of status, and we want to have a big house and we want to have the latest car or whatever because we want that status. So when someone wins the lottery, they were sharing that frequently, like people's neighbors have gone bankrupt because they're like, oh, we need to now live up to that, but they can't afford it, so they go into debt and all of this stuff. So that was one thing. The second thing was that like the world kind of feels like a little bit crazy at the moment for lots of different reasons, right? And there was this idea shared that part of that is the polarization of ideas and opinions and partisanship. And they shared this idea that was always there. Nothing's changed in the world at the moment. It's more that social media just magnifies it, all right? So when you think about, the people go bankrupt because they're comparing, and you think about social media and you think about comparing, and then they shared this other story, and it was about Julia Roberts, the actress, and they said Julia Roberts won like an Oscar or Emmy or whatever it is, and that same week she found out her husband was cheating on her. But like, if you just saw the photos, and then you were asked did Julia Roberts have a good week? It's like, well, probably not.
Right.
And then you think about social media, and we're all kind of acting on social media, and we don't really show the messy parts of our life. But life is really messy, really hard, really challenging. So you might look at Purina, Sarah, but if you're freezing when you go on stage, there's all of this stuff that people don't see. So that's just throwing these ideas at you, and seeing how they resonate with you and what they make you think about. Because I think there's some value in this specific conversation for our audience as positive reinforcement dog trainers who are on social media and who find it challenging to take action sometimes because they think they're going to mess up or they're not going to be perfect. What is all of that? That was a lot.
Yes, that is a lot. The social media thing, that is something that I have been pretty vocal with for a long time. And one of my combats to that was to post unedited training sessions. And this was before other people. This was when I had first started at Purina, I was posting a lot on social media. And so I'd post whole sessions because people needed to see the errors. They needed to see the dog struggle a little bit. They needed to see me struggle a little bit. They needed to see me ditch a training plan and pick up plan B and C and D and E because something wasn't going the way I thought it was going to do. So I was pretty vocal about that. I still am, just not as much. Just time does not allow me to post as much on social media. I also had a training group on Facebook that I would share a lot of the behind, not just an edited video of the perfect way to get from point A to point B. I think the other thing to remember when it applies to dog training is that there's a million ways to teach a single behavior. And if the first way doesn't work, you have to have another way and another way and another way. And if you don't have those ways, it's reaching out to somebody else who might have that. And even now, so one of the behaviors that I feel like I'm pretty good at training is holding an object, right? Or either a competition retrieve or just for cute pictures or whatever it is. And I've got maybe 6 or 7 different ways to teach it. Well, I've got a dog with me now who will be doing competition obedience, and we're really struggling getting this hold. Part of it is I only get to see her for 2 to 3 days at a time every month or two, or a couple of months. So I just can't get the number of reps in, but all of my tried and true methods of that I've learned in the past aren't quite getting there. So right now I'm literally in the midst of teaching a brand new way of teaching a hold that I've never done before. And I think it's going to actually work out really well for her. But knowing that just because one way doesn't work, that doesn't mean that you failed or the dog failed. It just means it's not the right fit for right now. And I think that applies to our real life too, right? So if I try one thing and right now I'm looking at changing the way we structure our group classes at our facility, I'm going to try it, and if it doesn't work, then it just doesn't work. I'm doing my research. I'm problem solving ahead of time. I'm doing a lot of, talking with other people who do this method, trying to problem solve before I get to that point. But I'm going to an expectation of, we'll give it a go. I think it'll be good. I think it'll be a great change, but if it doesn't work, we have a plan B and a C and a D and E. So I think there's a life lesson there when it comes to from dog training to our real life, that things are just going to be messy. They're going to be weird. They're not what social media portrays in any way. And I 100% agree with the magnification of the polarization, because that's what it does, because that's what the algorithm really likes, right? Polarized posts, either direction, on any side of the opinion of whatever argument, are going to get more reactions, and more reactions are going to trigger the algorithm to share them and show them more. And that's just the way social media works. And so it also works with dog trainers too. If they're posting more polarizing content, whichever direction it is, and if they're out there arguing with other people, that stuff gets shared more. And that's what's helping to create this divide in our community, in our community of dog trainers, and in our profession. So it's learning to ignore a lot of that stuff, I feel like, will help. Really looking for the people that are doing the work without feeding into that polarization, I think will help as well, and giving them our attention and our reactions and our likes and our comments to try to boost those posts in the algorithm versus, what we naturally want to do.
Can I give you a compliment?
Oh, sure. I'll always take a compliment.
I think that from what I have learned about you and seen online, that you're really good at failing. And I say that's a compliment because there was an old quote from an old Microsoft CEO or something that said, the fastest way to get success is to double your failure rate. And
that just means you're trying more.
Yeah. And you said a couple of things there. You said, we'd have to give it a go, and if it doesn't work, and then you continue to talk. But just that part is important to what I want to ask. And then you said learning to ignore a lot of that stuff. And my brain goes to, when we replace behavior, when we say we want our dog or our crow or whatever to stop this, then they need to be doing something else instead, right? They're going to be doing something. So let's think about what that something is. And when we think about things not working, and we think about ignoring stuff, my question is, what is Happy Dog Lodge Sarah doing instead? That is the I just want to ask that for the audience to go, what is happening in your mind now, instead of if you're successful because you've failed a lot, and that is I'm saying that as a compliment. Like, what is it that's been replaced with? Does that make sense?
As far as ignoring the other stuff?
So if you ignore it, like, what is now filling that brain space and those thoughts that used to be, oh, those person's doing that. Like, I'm not doing that. I'm not good enough. I'm not going to try this because I might fail, and like, I don't want to fail because, that would mess with my identity of someone who knows what they're doing.
Right, right. I think where that comes in the most in my current life is with the Frisbee dog part of it, right? So like I said, I have these two young dogs who are brilliant, right? But they're just starting their careers. I've taken a long time training that foundation, and now I'm just starting to piece together their freestyle routines this year. And so I was having a lot of imposter syndrome with that because I'm watching the people we're competing with play with their seasoned dogs. So they're 6-7-year-old dogs in the prime, of their career for Frisbee dog. And then I'm coming back and, doing my rounds, and I'm just not anywhere near their level of success with the actual catches. Our difficulty of tricks is just not quite there yet, just baby dog things, right? And so for that, I have to ignore what they're doing, their performances. I want to cheer on my friends, and I do, and I'm starting to be able to do that. But I need to get out of my head as far as looking at the tricks and going, oh, I don't have that trick in my routine, or, oh, I don't have that throw in my routine. Ooh, I'm not going to score as well because they did this X, Y, Z, whatever it may be. And I've started learning to focus more on my routine, on the things that we're successful with, creating a good routine from the ground up with a solid skeleton that can grow in the future. And I think that's the part that has really helped me through this transition is, so Cake, I have a dog named Cake. She's a 3-year-old Australian Coolie, and she is a really nice dog. But she has some foundation issues that we're still kind of working through. And so at the beginning of the season, I said, I'm going to create a routine that is simple. And I want a high success rate with that simple routine. And then as she gets better, I'll start making it difficult. So instead of going and watching these other teams and going, ooh, I should add that trick. Ooh, I should add that throw. Ooh, I should add that flat work. I say, no, I'm going to build my simple routine. And then from that, build something more difficult as she's ready. And so focusing on that and focusing on making little bits of our things more difficult at the level she's at has really, really helped me be more proactive and conscious about how I'm progressing her training versus just going, oh, I'm going to add this next cool trick that everybody's doing on social media.
I heard someone say the other day, like, we're all wanting like presentations and webinars and podcast episodes and content that says, here's your recipe for how you do this. But the reality is everyone's just so incredibly different, as are their learners, that potentially that's a wrong thing to be wanting to look for. I think there's some real gems in what you've said, in my assessment of what's valuable for the listeners of this show. And one of them I wrote down is focus more on my routine. So I was trying to look for that thing that you replaced the ignoring with. Focus more on my routine, the things that we are successful with that can grow in the future. Now, to me, Sarah, that sounds a heck of a lot like what we do with our dogs.
Mm-hmm. It's all the same stuff. And I think once you realize that, you end up giving yourself a lot more grace as a professional dog trainer than, and I would say in your real daily life, right? So when you realize it's all the same psychology, it's all the same everything, everything just kind of gets a little bit easier. And I think you're a little bit kinder to yourself when you do that.
And likely others.
Yes, that's the goal.
Kinder to yourself. That is a pretty aspirational thing to move towards. Well, do you think we're unkind to ourselves?
Yeah, I know I've been very unkind to myself as far as expectations and I think that focusing on mental health is a big thing that needs to be done and talked more about. And I know that in the last few years, it's gotten a lot more common to talk about it, but it's different to actually do the work. And I think it's really important that people do the work.
Is gratitude important to you?
Gratitude is everything. Yeah, absolutely. Gratitude. And I would say, was it 7 years ago or so, I forced myself to become an optimist, like the annoying kind of optimist, the one that the worst day would happen and you'd still find that silver lining. So if something happened, I would find a silver lining in it. I got in a car accident. Well, at least now I get a new car, right? Or, something really, really just off the wall, absolutely obscene. And when you force yourself to do that, just like we're putting the reps in with our dogs, when we're doing those repetitions with the counter conditioning over and over and over and over and over and over again, and you're building that reinforcement history, same thing with this silly silver lining game that I created for myself. It becomes habit. And pretty soon, instead of finding the negative and the things that happen in your daily life or the things that are on social media or the opinions that people are saying to you, you're finding the positive because that's what you've made yourself do. And pretty soon you're not making yourself do it anymore. And now your whole mind shift or your whole mindset has shifted.
Wait, you use force? This is a positive. No, I'm just checking.
I was creating a pattern game. Okay.
I was going to say, I think this was Jerry Seinfeld who said this. I may be wrong, but expectations are where a lot of frustration comes in because of unmet expectations. And gratitude is being thankful for expectations that were met.
I like that.
Jerry Seinfeld. Hey, we're running out of time for part one. I'm excited to talk to you about your journey about where your journey has led you to fail forward in a completely new business. And I'm excited just to talk business with you in part two of our conversation. But can you just finish your story with us? For us, sorry, not with us and for us, and take us kind of from where you left off to just getting started with your business, having a child, to kind of what the last few years has been like for you.
Yeah, the last few years, it's a kind of a weird story, and it's one of those things where it's been posted all over social media, and it's a good lesson kind of for people to pay attention to. When we moved back up to Minnesota, it was really hard finding somewhere to live with all of my retired performing dogs, right? So when my dogs retire, I don't rehome them. They stay with me. They're my pets. I'm not going to do that. So I have 10 dogs. And finding a county that would allow us to have that many dogs was very difficult. And we got some poor advice from a realtor and ended up buying our house. Well, our house has 12 acres. It's zoned agricultural. So we figured we would put up a Frisbee dog or a Mondia ring field that had it professionally flattened, put in irrigation with the hopes of being able to host Frisbee dog competitions here. I failed to look at the business requirements and ordinances, and we had a neighbor get upset. So we went to the county council, and they deemed they would not grant us a kennel license for very valid reasons. And so I was in a pinch. So either we find a new home with my husband having just built his dream shop because he's into cars, or we find another solution. And so that other solution actually was something that I was working towards anyway. Just I wanted to wait until my kid was a little bit older, because she was a year and a half or so at that time, was to buy a boarding facility. And there just happened to be a boarding facility located 10 minutes from where we live that was for sale. The old owners had retired. And so with the help of some amazing people, I was able to purchase that facility, and that's kind of what I'm working on now. So it's been 2 years. I've had it. It's boarding, boarding, grooming. We do a day camp and enrichment-based daycare and training. And I've got a wonderful team of really, really passionate people that I'm super grateful to have. But yeah, that's where I'm at, is I'm kind of building that up while still trying to stay a little bit relevant in the professional dog sport world. But yeah, my focus is very local right now versus worldwide. And yeah, it's a good little transition.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about business in part two of our conversation. Like I said, before we wrap up part one though, Sarah, could you just let the listeners know where they can go online to find you?
Yeah, social media, probably Facebook is the best way. It's the one I actually update the most. So I'm public on there, Sara Brueske, Brueske. If you want to see what's happening at our boarding facility, you can follow us at Happy Dog Lodge. Please follow us. The more people that follow us boosts us, and that helps everything. Happy Dog Lodge, just as it sounds. Otherwise, same website, happydoglodge.com.
Amazing. And we will, of course, link to all of this in the show notes as well. Sara, this has been so much fun. So from myself and on behalf of everyone listening, we really appreciate you taking the time to come and hang out with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you so much for listening as well. This is your host, Ryan Cartlidge, signing off from this episode of the Animal Training Academy podcast show. We hope today's conversation inspired you and equipped you with new tools for your trainer's toolbox. Remember, every challenge in training is an opportunity to learn and sharpen your animal training geekery. Embrace the rough patches, learn from them, and keep improving. And don't forget, the path to growing your skills and expanding your knowledge continues beyond this episode. Visit www.atamember.com to join our supportive membership, where you will find a community of trainers just like you. Together, we're making a huge positive difference in the lives of animal and human learners worldwide. Until next time, keep honing your skills, stay awesome, and remember, every interaction with an animal or human learner is your opportunity to create ripples. We're here cheering you on every step of the way. See you at the next episode.